This live stream is brought to you by Stihl, Evergreen Garden Care. Stihl is Australia's most trusted brand of garden power tools, backed by 95 years of German engineering excellence. To get your hands on their range, visit your local Stihl dealer today, or visit stihl.com.au.
Garden Express are Australia's leading mail ordering service, offering a wide range of quality gardening products. Each week on the Garden Gurus Live, the team at Garden Express will share a weekly offer. So make sure after today's show you jump online and visit their website.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Garden Gurus Live. I'm Trevor Cochran. We've got quite the team in here today producing the show, and we have some great things coming up in today's show, including we're catching up with Rowan Peterson from Garden Express a bit later on. He's got something that'll really get you sort of inspired, I suppose, to get out planting, because now is a brilliant time to be planting for the spring. I know that all sort of sounds confusing, but it's what it's all about. So we'll talk about that a bit later on. Autumn is also one of the very best times to care for your plants, and I'll share some of my tips on autumn care. I've got my plant of the week, one that particularly ladies, I really want you to listen to this one because it's all about your health. And there's something you should be doing at the moment to make sure that you stay healthy. Of course, the whole reason we're here, I suppose, is to be able to answer your gardening questions. And we've got a lot of them flowing through already, which is fantastic. When you send them through, make sure you tell us what state you're from and, of course, your town. It really does make a big difference, particularly in a state like, say, Queensland, where far north Queensland's quite different to the southeast section of the state. Don't forget, of course, make sure you hit the like button too if you like what we're doing. What a big weekend we've just had. Up where I live, we had a great garden festival on. Had the famous Costa from Gardening Australia turn up, which was absolutely wonderful, but the weather was magnificent and people came out in droves. And I think it's the thing about autumn is it is just such a wonderful time of the year. Albeit here in the west at the moment, winter has arrived big time. We have a lot of rain coming in over the next few days. It's cooler, but I've got to say it is absolutely like the perfect time to be out planting. And there's a whole bunch of different plants that you really want to be planting. Now, I know that right at this moment, Sam is desperate to put a photo up for me. So Sue from Victoria sent this picture. She wants to know what's on my leaves. And I'm hoping, oh dear. Yes, so it looks to me like you've got eucalyptus and you've got psyllids, I would say. That looks like, it's a little bit difficult to tell from this angle, but look, quite a common problem this time of the year. These insects generally are controlled by predatory insects, but sometimes the balance kind of gets out in nature. And you can treat it, and the easiest way to do it is just to give it a bit of a spray with white oil or pest oil or one of those horticultural oils. They'll clean them up really, really quickly. It's very, very effective. Okay, so we've started in Victoria. We're staying in Victoria for a moment. Jennifer is in East Gippsland and she's joined us via YouTube. My alamanders, now we've got it spelt like alamanders, but it's alamander. Red and white ones are very spindly. Should I cut them back for winter or cover them from the frost? You should cover them from the frost, okay? So this is a wonderful little compact flowering plant, and sometimes a creeper, and it can be quite tendrily, and I know why you're talking about it being spindly, because they can really get like that. The only thing with them is that they don't like the cold. So I think what you want to do is just protect them through the winter. About November in East Gippsland would be the perfect timing to give them a good prune back. Now, I know it seems strange because they'll be growing, but they'll recover from the pruning quickly and come back twice as thick and producing lots and lots of flower as the weather gets warmer. All right, let's go to South Australia. Marie is in South Australia. Hello, thanks for joining us, Marie. Is it okay to prune my crepe myrtles? They are so tall and they're in their 5th year. I'd like to enjoy their flowers a little close to the ground. Actually, Marie, this is the perfect time to be pruning deciduous plants. And of course, crepe myrtles are deciduous shrubs and trees. And now is the time to bring them back into shape. So absolutely. One of our great friends over here in Perth is Christine. She's in Stirling and she joins us just about every week. And thank you so much for your support, Christine. It's Really, really appreciate it, seriously. You said good morning to myself and to the team. Good morning to you. It's so good to get this rain, and I love the thunderstorms that have moved through. My garden will be very happy. Hopefully you can give me some advice about whether it's a good idea to repot my plants that have been affected by mealybugs. In actual fact, now, Christine, is the perfect time. Interestingly enough, mealybug gets down into the roots this time of the year. So if you're repotting, knock all the soil off your plants, get a bucket of water and mix up an insecticide in there. Now, there's a few different types that you can use. One that I found very effective with mealybug is Success. And mix a little bit up into the water of the bucket and pop your plants in root first. And just let them sit in there for about 5 minutes before you replant into a really good quality potting mix. I'm going to be talking about Osmocote Premium Plus. It's a superior potting mix. I'll talk about it a bit later on this morning. Make sure you tune in because that's what I would recommend you use. Always use the best soil and you'll get the best results. Okay, we're not sure where Treen is from, but let's go to Treen's question. It says, hi gurus, I'm a school teacher wanting to start our community garden. Don't know where to start with the planning. With vegetable garden, there's literally just a garden. There's no plants. Can you help me with where to start, please? Well, right at the moment, Treen, if I was going to get started with a community garden, with any kind of garden, with new garden beds, I would be pouring liquid fertilizer over it. I'd do it in the form of something that's soft and gentle. So I'm thinking of something like Power Feed, but also I'd be looking at maybe adding some blood and bone with the soil, particularly for edible gardens, and cultivating it into the top of the soil. Remember, vegetable gardens really are the most intensive form of farming. So the first thing you have to do is to get your soil right, and this is one way you can do it. Another thing that's not a bad idea is also putting in some rock minerals or trace elements. They really do a lot of good in getting the balance right in the soil of all the nutrients. Remembering that what you're growing in the veggie garden, you will be eating. And you want to make sure that you're actually getting all those trace elements and minerals, all those essential micro and macronutrients that your body needs. And you're only going to get that if you make sure you're putting it back into the soil, which is why feeding vegetable gardens is so important. What you choose to plant is completely up to you. On the weekend, this coming weekend, I will be putting peas in. I'm going to be putting some beans in too. They're a little bit slower, but I find the dwarf beans do really well in my garden this time of the year. But of course, snow peas and peas, now's the time to get them into your garden, along with all the brassicas. So your cabbages, your broccoli, your cauliflowers, all of those, they'll all do really well this time of the year. All right, let's go to New Mexico, not in the US, but in New South Wales. Hello, Jody. Thanks for joining us. How do I get rid of snails and slugs in my very big garden? Is there a spray that kills them? I've got pets. You're not keen on pellets. Great. Now there are some iron sulfate based pellets that you can get these days, which are not really going to hurt animals. They're not really going to do a huge amount of harm. But the old-fashioned solution for treating slugs and snails, that's probably a lot more gentle in many ways, is to use copper. Now remember, snails and slugs are mollusks. They're like the shellfish that you get out of the ocean. The one thing about all mollusks is they have a real low tolerance to copper. So whether you do a copper oxychloride spray over the garden, that will clear off a lot of fungal problems for a start, which has been a bit of a problem in New South Wales with the questions we're getting asked. But also probably more importantly, is that if you were to use something that's not a spray, but maybe more like bluestone, so you can get the copper bluestone and spread those granules around the outside of garden beds, your dogs and cats are not going to consume it. They're not going to be interested. But if a snail crosses over it, it'll absorb the copper and that'll take the snails out. So probably the safest way to go, remembering that copper sulfate is just a natural soil mineral. So hopefully that helps Jody out there in New Mexico. Thanks so much for joining us. Now, another friend who joins us every week has got some great questions and is always planting new things. I'd love to see some photos of your garden, Tyson. Tyson's in Victoria and is in Baronia, actually, in Victoria, beautiful part of the world. And Tyson, every week you do ask questions with regards to what to plant. And I just mentioned before something you should be putting into your garden. We always talk about putting controlled release fertilizers into gardens, and this is one of the best times of the year to do it. And the reason is soil moisture levels are just perfect. So getting some osmocote out, Tyson's a good thing, just to get the nutrients right. Now, you've asked a specific question today, and that is, can I plant the Chinese cabbage Nagoaka? It's actually a Japanese form of cabbage, believe it or not, that is absolutely delicious. And now's the time to be putting it in. In fact, you can do a lot of those sorts of things. There's quite a few of the radishes that are also really good to go in this time of the year, and planting them by seed is the best way to do it. So once your soil moisture levels are absolutely spot on, then you can't go wrong. It really is a perfect time to be planting out seeds, particularly before it gets too cold. So once they get established, you'll be fine. Hopefully that helps, Tyson. Thanks so much for supporting us. Now, Tanya's in South Australia. We're getting some good questions out of SA today. I bought a mango tree and all its leaves are going brown and you're not sure what to do. Now, I'm assuming, Tanya, that you've had a frost or some really cool weather, because that's why mango trees will start to brown off. Now, the easiest thing to do in a young tree is to get one of those plastic covers. They're a sleeve. You put 3 or 4 stakes down, and then you put the plastic sleeve around the outside. It's going to stop the damage from things like frosts and so on, and it just maintains a high humidity and high moisture level. If the leaves have gone brown now, it might be worthwhile giving it a spray with something called Cocide. Now, again, it's another one of those copper-based sprays. Great way to clear off any bacterial diseases which mangoes can get if they get a bit of a setback early in the season. So we've got quite a long time to go into winter and get through that winter and into warm weather before the mango will be able to grow out of any damage. So you've got to try and protect it the best you can. I hope that helps, Tanya. All right, Eugenie, Tassie. Actually, we are getting so many questions coming out of Tassie these days, which is fabulous. What a great part of the world, and producing some of the most magnificent gardens. Now, Eugenie's got this question about growing Chinese pistachio trees. A little bit of a tip on it. Well, look, you know what? Beautiful, beautiful ornamental foliage tree, and they should have pretty much dropped their foliage now in Tassie. So the time to grow them or to transplant them or to plant them is during the winter when they're dormant. You avoid most of the root damage that occurs in that transplant process. When you put them into the ground, a little bit of seaweed extract is a fantastic way to go. And the only thing that's really important is when they start to grow in the spring is making sure you feed them with a nice, gentle plant food. And again, controlled release fertilizers are really good, but don't even worry about it until October. Eugenie, they need to have a rest now. Let it rest. And if you don't have one yet and you want to put one in, now's the time to plant it. Hopefully that helps. All right, Precious. Hello, Precious. You've joined us from Western Sydney. Video. You sent us a video, which is fantastic. You've got a question regarding your chili plants. We're having a look at them here. Do you know why the chilies are not maturing and just turn red? Well, they all look pretty good to me. In fact, this variety is one that I'm growing at home myself, and they should be fine. There's the green ones, obviously. You can pick them green, but once they turn red, they're ready for harvesting. So I'm not quite sure what the problem is. But look, it looks pretty good to me. I don't think there's a problem, Precious. I'd start picking those red ones. We're making chili sauce, I suppose, yesterday, because we've been harvesting a lot of them out of my garden. And the house had a distinct chili flavour to it. In fact, anybody who touched something that had been in contact with the chilies and then rubbed their eyes or their lips were suffering because of the slight burn there. So it is the time to be harvesting. It's a great time of the year. All right, we're coming back to WA. Lynn is in Claremont. She'll be just around the corner from our studios, where it is just pouring with rain at the moment, so she'll be getting a good drench there. You've got 2 large Chinese tallow trees, and they've been dropping lots of leaves soon. Is it okay to leave the leaves in the garden and to use them as a mulch, or do they take too long to break down? Now, Lynn, I'm going to tell everybody this. It is such a wonderful time of the year to do something really important, and that is to get all the leaves off your lawn and back into the garden beds and let them break down. Because as these trees grow, I'm talking to you all the time about feeding your plants, and those nutrients are being taken up by the roots and they go into the foliage. The foliage is taking energy from the sun, and building up, goodness in the leaves. And then when they drop their foliage, you want that foliage to go back into the soil. It's the natural cycle of nutrients in the plant going to the ground, again being taken up in the springtime through the roots and into the leaves again. So please don't do that. Please make sure you put them all back into the garden beds. If you find you want to keep your garden beds clear, or you've got lots of plants in the garden beds and they're getting smothered, then take the leaves and put them into a little spot where you can just break them down, because they will break down during this nice moist period of time, and particularly Chinese tallows. A lot of people say to me about natives, so particularly the eucalypts, the leaves don't break down, but they do break down. They just take a bit longer. So just be a little bit patient. But Chinese tallow trees leaves will break down very, very quickly, so you don't have to worry. Now, every week on this show, and I've really got to say a huge thank you to these guys, we talk to Australia's online garden centre. It's Garden Express, and they back everything that we do with the Garden Gurus so well. And we love talking about all the different plants that they bring through. And this morning I've got Rowan Peterson joining us. Good morning, Rowan.
Hey, Trevor. How you going?
Yeah, very good, thanks, mate. I'm not sure what the weather's like there, but it's pretty wet here.
It's not wet. The sun's out. It's beautiful, actually. It's been quite cold in the mornings, but once the cloud lifts, because we're up in the hills, obviously, once the cloud lifts, the sun comes out. It's actually really pleasant.
I was talking with some friends over the weekend. It was my auntie's 80th birthday, and so I've been having a lot of conversations back and forth into Melbourne over the weekend. Apparently the weather was magnificent, a beautiful autumn weekend, which is just sensational. Mate, look, let's just talk about autumn. It's a bit of a different time of the year. We've finished our spring flowering bulbs. We're coming into that cooler season. I just talked about leaves falling off trees, but there's still some bulbs that go in this time of the year, isn't there?
There really is. And one of those is Calla Lilies. Also, things like liliums are going into the ground this time of year. Yep. And then, of course, a little bit later, we've got dahlias and hippies, but they're all summer flowering bulbs or tubers.
Yeah. Now, I know people are thinking, well, Calla Lilies, they'll be dying back down in a lot of gardens, and in some gardens completely dormant now, but that is the time to be getting your hands on them. There's quite a range of colours these days. Once upon a time, some people sort of will know them as arum lilies, but Calla Lilies are quite distinctively different. And they produce some really unusual colours, some wonderful oranges and yellows.
That's true, yeah, and pinks and even dark purple to burgundy shades, almost black, which are really stunning.
Now, tell me, you guys have got a special deal going at the moment on Callas. I know we did it on the Garden Guru show.
Yes, so we do. If you were to buy these Calla Lilies at the moment, we're selling them as individual bulbs or rhizomes for $12.90. But what we've put together for viewers of Garden Gurus is a great collection of four different colours. So you get a beautiful pink, a golden yellow, one of those oranges, really deep oranges, and the almost black one that I spoke about earlier. And we've 25% saving on those. So if you get all four, saving 25% for only $38. Regularly $51.60.
That's a huge saving, and now's the time to be collecting those flowers for the spring, because you will plant them in the sort of latter part, I suppose, of winter. So it's a good deal to get your hands on them. And these are obviously highly collectible varieties. That nightclub, that dark coloured one, those black flowers are just so big and in trend, and even foliage like the black Zamia coolis here. This one's called Raven. Everybody's just gone crazy for those black colours.
Yeah, and it really is stunning. I've actually got one of those. I'm not too sure how well you'll see that there, but you can see that's the rhizome and the size of the rhizome that you're going to get. Now, generally, we say you're going to get about 3 to 7 flowers from a rhizome that size, which is what people will be getting. But you can see just there that there's maybe 10 to 12 shoots coming out of that already. So, and you can see the little pups there that obviously multiply each year.
I was going to say, there'll be more flowers next year as well too. So they're huge, Rowan. I've not seen. I grow these at home in my own garden. I love them. The flowers are fantastic to bring indoors because they last so long. But I've not seen sort of corms that big. They are massive.
Yeah, they're a really good size, and that's probably an average. There's a few a little bit smaller than that, but there's a lot bigger than that as well. So yeah, it's really good value.
Now, mate, before you head off this morning, and I know you guys have been absolutely flat out busy getting spring flowering bulbs, but it is the time of the year to be putting deciduous plants in. Now, we're not far off getting our hands on deciduous fruit trees, etc. But just at the moment, deciduous roses, that's the first of the deciduous plants of the season. You guys, you've got a bit of a collection going there as well, right?
Yeah, so we've just put out our rose catalogue, or what we class as our early roses. So our bare root roses sort of go from late April all the way through to late July, and depending on the varieties as to when we get them. So we've just put our catalogue out together, which is online now, which is all the early varieties, and then we will list the other ones as they come available. We've changed the way we do things a little bit, and it's thanks to COVID in that we're listing things as they arrive rather than planning for a massive catalogue that sometimes takes 12 to 14 weeks to do, and then you have crop failures and things like that. So we've just tried to condense it a little bit and only list things as they come on board, so that customers are getting the plants that are ready to plant now, and bare root roses is obviously one of those, which are it's been just under 2 weeks since we launched that catalogue, and it's going incredibly well. I was talking to Veron, our horticultural, this morning, and I think there's 4 or 5 varieties that have already sold out. So if your viewers are after the roses, I would suggest you do get in quickly. Nothing seems to last long these days.
No, that's the thing with COVID is it's changed everything, and a lot of people don't realise that it takes 2 years to grow a rose to the size that it's ready to go and be bagged and sold bare rooted. But there's also significant savings buying them this time of the year, which is why I brought it up, because it's a chance to set up a beautiful rose garden now and save a fortune on what you pay during the summer months for a potted rose.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the best time for us to be shipping them around the country too, because they are asleep, dormant, obviously. So, they do travel. Sometimes they can be in the mail for 7 to 14 days without any trouble at all. Just take them out of the wrapper when you get them back at home. Give them a bit of a prune, and they'll be ready to go. Come September, you'll start seeing them shooting, and then November, beautiful roses.
Perfect. Now, Rowan, if people want to get their hands on this super deal, what do they got to do?
So jump onto the website. There's a banner there that's got Bonnie's lovely face on it, straight through to the Calla offer. Once again, it's 4 colours for $38, which is a 25% saving, and you're going to get a variety of colours there. Just beautiful.
Fantastic, mate. That's great. gardenexpress.com.au, that's where you start, and there's a whole bunch of other things to look out for whilst you are on the website. Mate, thanks for joining us. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too, mate. Good story.
Okay, we need to keep moving because these questions are flowing through. Now, Ilana from Kalgoorlie in WA, you sent us some photos, and all you've ever wanted is a frangipani in your front yard. Kalgoorlie, by the way, is the goldfields of Western Australia, and you can see there's a frangipani. You're really anxious about this tree surviving. Now, the foliage is showing signs of wilting. Okay, so you can see how you transplanted it. Yeah, look, it's gone through some shock. Now, the interesting thing is that they should be dropping their leaves now anyway, and that's got a lot of foliage on it. And in all honesty, I would go through this tree and strip all the foliage off. I think it's got a little bit of transplant shock. I would give it a really good soak with sea salt. I think that's really important, and you'll find that should do the job, because you say you've used it, but just keep it going. Now, you said on advice from me, you gave it a bit of a prune back, roughly 20%, and you've not watered the tree since Sunday. But you don't actually need to water it at the moment. You really probably just leave it. I think the transplant is is really just this thing that's caused it to go into shock. As I said, it's going to drop its leaves. It's meant to drop its leaves now. Take them off and let it sit through the winter and slowly recover from the transplant shock, and you'll find it will all be good. All right, Joe is in Melbourne, Victoria, and now Joe is trying to grow his very own Staghorn Ferns. Now, it's one of my favourite plants. I made everybody in here giggle earlier on because I said it's Platycerum superbum or superbum, however you want to call it. And it's a beautiful, beautiful plant. Now, it is a member of the fern family. They grow in the forks of trees in tropical conditions. They love high humidity. You've also got bird nests from your own plant spores, which you've carefully collected. It's really good. Now, I love what you've done here. Thank you so much for doing this. Your recipe. You've been putting them into small plastic tubs, half peat moss, half perlite, and you've soaked it with boiling hot water and left it to cool. Then you've sprayed all the surfaces of the soil itself with a fungicide, and finally sprinkled the spores on top of that. Now, the reason you did the hot water and the fungicide is to make sure that there's no risk of some kind of fungal infection at the same time, allowing the plants just to get the spores to get established. After you've done all of that, store them in the greenhouse and you see how they go. Now, I've been told they can take up to 6 months to sprout, and I think you're referring specifically to the staghorns, and you're quite correct. It's probably 3 months before you really start to see them sort of evolving and establishing, and then they start to take off, and you'll start to see the shields are the first things that start to appear, and later on it's time to take them off and put them onto boards or into the forks of trees. Now, you don't live in a tropical area, but you do have a situation where it's very good humidity, and that's actually the key. You've said you've got a greenhouse and it's not heated. We can see we've got the pictures of them there, and it's the fronds at the bottom. It's not the shields that come off the top, but it's those ones that hang down the bottom where the spores sit. It's that brown area underneath the foliage that really makes such a big difference, and that's where all the spores are, and that's what you're going to collect, and that's what you're going to plant. Don't worry about the greenhouse not being heated. You don't want it to be too cold, but as generally greenhouses will hold, they hold heat within them, so they're a few degrees warmer than any outdoor ambient temperature. Joe, I think you're doing all the right things, and thank you so much for sharing your recipe with regards to the soil and how you go about getting them established. I'm certain you're going to have success, and I hope you'll do us a favour, take some photographs of the process as you go through and share that with us. We'll pop it up on the show, because there's a lot of people who love staghorn ferns, but the truth of the matter is they are really expensive to buy, so not everybody can afford it, and growing your own is a wonderful way to go. So congratulations, mate. Thank you. Rochelle, staying in Melbourne. I'm not quite sure where in Melbourne, but you want to know what are the best plants I can put around my pool. So far, I've planted palm trees, fountain grass, and ferny type plants as well. And everything's been dying. Well, that's really interesting, because ferns, I can understand, sometimes they'll struggle in full sun, but fountain grass is pretty tough. Palms, pretty tough. So maybe what you should do, Rochelle, is send us a couple of photographs of the area and maybe give us a little bit of an indication as to the direction that the garden is facing. Now, I say that because if it's in a south-facing position, it's probably not getting any sunlight, and some of those plants really do need some warm sunlight at some point during the day. If it's in a north direction and they're fully exposed to the northern sun, they could be getting cooked during the summer. So let's find out what that is, and I'll give you some specific plants and some suggestions, because I think it really gets down to what is the right plant for the right conditions. And it seems to me like if everything's ended up dying so far, it's probably more about the plant selection and the aspect. So send us some photos. All right, Jenny is in Joondalup. We've come back to WA. Would you give me some advice on what to plant around my pool? It must be pool time of the year. Jenny, look, in WA, palms are a wonderful thing. I've got some bamboos around mine. I've got golden cane palms. And then to fill in the base, I've got things like Philodendron, Xanadu. Any of those large leafy foliage sort of plants, that's the way to go. You want those to be sort of almost hanging over the pool. You don't want them in the pool because they have this wonderful ability to suck up all the chlorine out. So you'll end up using lots more chlorine as the carbon from the leaves breaks down. So there's a few suggestions. That's what I use in around mine. As a backdrop, I've got some magnificent Alexander palms. I love that. It's one of my favorites. You can also use bungalows. They also look really good. And planting them in groups of 3 or 4 gets a real cluster kind of effect as well. But the golden cane palms are one of the best screening plants you'll ever get, and certainly mine at home. They look fantastic. Hopefully that helps you, Jenny, and maybe Rochelle in Melbourne as well. All right. Ilana's come back from Kalgoorlie. Thanks, Ilana. Just to clarify, what strength sea soil and how often do you suggest to apply? You probably needed to do just at the normal mixture. You don't want to use too much of anything just at the moment. And I'm going to tell you twice. I don't think you can't really burn plants with sea salt because it's not a fertilizer. It is a soil tonic. It's really more about the plant's health. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. But look, just at the moment, I would probably have given it 1 or 2 hits with the sea salt and then let it settle. That's probably the most important thing. Let it rest over winter and it'll come back, I'm sure. It'll be fine. Don't worry. Kerry is in Rolly Stone, staying in Perth at the moment. We're heading to Sydney in a minute. Hi all. I planted peas about 4 weeks ago and they were going great, and all of a sudden they've stopped growing and they're going yellow. What can I try to do to save them? It's a very odd thing, Kerry, that they're going yellow. It could be that they've just run out of energy in the soil. So a little bit of fertilizer at the moment, and fast release fertilizers. So liquid fertilizers, or one of those blends is a couple of Osmocote Plus organic mixtures that are designed specifically for vegetables. Go in, they come in a little plastic tub, and be a little generous with that. The only other problem could be that they're getting some kind of root fungal rot, and that some kind of fusarium wilt or something along those lines, that will send them yellow. Peas do love nitrogen. They do love their food when they get started. They do grow very, very fast. So probably now is a good time to get some nutrient onto it. I think that's what your problem is, hopefully anyway. Ruth is in Sydney. When can I transplant some spider lily bulbs and agapanthus bulbs? Where they are planted now is no longer suitable. They won't be getting sun, so I want to move them to a better place. Can I do it now? Absolutely. You definitely can. Now's the time to be transplanting, digging them up. My spider lily bulbs will be about 3 weeks away from starting to die back. And agapanthus, look, you can transplant agapanthus any time of the year, but winter is most definitely one of the best times to do it. So now's the time to do it. Hopefully that helps Ruth in Sydney. Now, you know what? We talk about this time of the year and there's so many different things that need to be done. One of the big things is actually trimming trees and shrubs. And sometimes loppers or secateurs just won't do the job. Sometimes you need to be using a chainsaw. And if you are, you need to make sure that you are safe when you do it. It's vitally important. So when you go to your local still dealer, you need to make sure you're getting the right advice about safety equipment. And here's a little story we did in our local still dealer in Maddington. So Chris, we've got the chainsaw. I know what I need. I know how to obviously use it. The important thing though is making sure that we have protection, so safety protection. What do you recommend?
I recommend you'll need pretty much everything, Trevor.
Okay.
First thing I'll be looking at would be a helmet.
Okay.
The helmet's going to give you face protection and ear protection, very loud machine. Wood chips are going to be flying left, right and centre.
Right.
The steel mesh will protect your face so you don't get any debris.
And you can wear sunglasses or safety
Sunglasses, safety glasses, whatever you prefer.
These have also got ear protection, right? Pretty important because this is motorised, so it's going to kick up a bit of noise.
It's going to be very loud, especially at full revs.
Right.
Full RPM, it's going to be screaming.
Okay, well let's grab one of those.
Cool.
I've got like a good range of gloves, but I don't know what the best gloves are when it comes to chainsaws.
So when it comes to gloves, you can get gloves that are going to be great for handling the chainsaw and handling what you're cutting.
Yep.
But what you really need is gloves that are going to be protective against the blade. Even when the blade's not moving, it's very sharp.
Yes.
So the gloves I would be recommending are your dynamic protect.
Right.
These have got cut protection in there.
Right. I feel that's solid. So cut protection. So it's not going to cut through here.
It's basically on the back side of it there. It's not going to cut through.
Brilliant.
It's going to jam up the soil.
Okay. Chaps are a very important part of chainsaws, aren't they?
Very important. So you only get one pair of legs.
Yep.
So a pair of chaps. It's going to protect the front of your legs.
Yeah.
Because that's where you're going to cop any of the debris.
Yeah.
And if you do slip, definitely worth getting a pair of chaps. You can get trousers if you want to. Chaps are more than adequate.
Last but not least, foot protection, steel cap boots, good solid leather boots.
Definitely no
Really
loose
important.
clothing.
Yep. Great advice. All right. I think we can head to the counter, mate.
Cool. Awesome.
He's good talent, that guy, isn't he? He's just been, I've gone and done a few bits and pieces with him. He's just been this amazing fountain of knowledge. And it's actually one of the things you'll find by going to a specialist dealer. These guys live and breathe their products, and they make sure that you're getting all the right advice. But safety equipment, particularly with chainsaws, vitally important. And I have done a bit of a story on the Garden Gurus on a brand new type of chainsaw just recently. So if you want to see me in chaps, make sure you tune in. Now, let's move quickly away from that particular subject and maybe move towards Plant of the Week. And I've got a really important message for you. Okay, this is actually something that is vitally important for health. And it is about apples. And it's about those apples. So I've just been doing a few talks. I was in Shark Bay, which is in the Midwest of Western Australia, last week. And one of the things I emphasised is some research that we have talked about before. Royal Perth Hospital conducted some research, a 10-year study on apples. And, you get your apples, you kind of get your golden ones, you get your green ones, and you get your dark skin ones. And the research they found out is that the dark skin ones are unbelievably good for you. In fact, the biggest killer of women in Australia is hypertension. So the illnesses that come as a result of that, things like stroke, heart disease, those sorts of things. Now, apparently, the story goes that a 10-year trial, I think about 10,000 women, so it's very significant, eating these beautiful apples with the darker skin, their levels of hypertension came right down. It was literally one apple. And that old story about an apple a day keeps the doctor away may well have some really solid foundation based off this particular bit of research. Now, it's an interesting thing because it is about the darkness of the skin. And this is a Bravo apple, this particular one. But, Red Delicious, any of those ones, the Pink Ladies, those sorts, they are all going to have very high levels of anthocyanins. And anthocyanins are the pigmentations in the skin. Interestingly enough, these natural plant chemicals occur because of exposure to sunlight. So it's a sunlight that makes the skin of the apple darker and more intense in those, what we call flavonoids, these plant chemicals that are so good for us. So they're real anti-cancer fighting, they're anti high blood pressure and the cholesterol issues that we have. And look, just eating one apple a day to be able to reduce your risk of death of one of those terrible diseases, it just seems sensible to me. So why don't you give it a go? Now, there's a lot of you out there that will turn around and say, oh yeah, that's great, but I haven't got room for a great big apple tree. And the good news is you don't have to worry about having room for a great big apple tree because you can grow an apple tree in a large tub and it's going to produce, depending on the variety, but somewhere around about 20 or 30 apples for you a year. But the trick is you need to grow them in really good soil. And I literally this week, I had this big, long explanation to somebody about, setting up their own potting mix. You can make your own potting mix. There is no question about it. What I would suggest you do is make sure you're using premium ingredients, so composted barks. Composted sawdust is also a very good thing. You need to use a nice, coarse, ideally river sand, controlled release fertilizers, and even something like cocoa peat to hold moisture in that soil long enough. And that's for outdoor plants. So if you've got time to do that, then fantastic. But most of us don't. And then it's a case of saying, well, look, what do I do? Do I buy the $4 bag of potting mix or do I buy the $14 bag of potting mix? And my recommendation is, if you want to grow a beautiful apple tree in a half wine barrel at home, get 2 or 3 really good bags of potting mix, the good quality one. And the next question you're going to say is, well, which one is that? And it's one from Scott's. It's called Osmocote Premium Plus. Now, there is an Osmocote potting mix, the orange bag. Great product, no problem with that at all. But when you're talking about growing fruit trees or edible plants like herbs, for example, you want to make sure you're using the very best. There's a reason for that, and that's because you're going to be ingesting the produce yourself. So you want all the goodness and you want them to grow strong and healthy. And that's really like an absolutely critical thing, is to make sure that they're grown in the right potting mix. Now, if you're getting herbs from a local nursery, and there's a good example of some really beautiful quality plants, let me assure you that a nurseryman would never grow in a cheaper potting mix. They're not looking for cheaper, they're looking for better results all the time. So it gets down to the quality. And that's why that Premium Plus potting mix, the one in the blue bags, and I'll emphasize it, is well worthwhile getting your hands on. It really is good. It's got everything in it that you would ever want, fully composted. Most importantly, it feeds for 6 months. I should point out that if you're buying one of those cheaper potting mixes, often they haven't been composted for a very long period of time. And if they break down, they'll take nitrogen out of the soil to do so. So they're actually taking nutrients out as they're breaking the organics down. And then you'll end up with this slumping or compacting the soil in the pot as well. All the things that you don't want. And then there's some stuff that, well, you just can't really get your hands on that is found in this particular potting mix. They've got growth stimulants in there, so it gets really strong root growth going straight away. You've got a koya. It's a renewable resource that holds moisture and nutrients in the soil. They've got some water crystals in there that are non-toxic and hold up to 100 times their own weight in water. So when you water, the crystals suck it up, hold that moisture in, and then slowly release that moisture back to the soil over the following day. So you save money. And there's another thing that a lot of people are seeing at the moment, and that is that they're finding that their pots actually have dry pockets. They were getting dry and dry during the summer months. And what happens with dry pockets? Ants go straight to them because they can get in there and they can avoid basically getting soaked out during the summer months. So you suddenly find your pots are full of ant nests, which is the last thing you want. So there's a lot of very good reasons why you would want to use a really good quality potting mix, particularly when you're growing things that are edible, but not exclusively those two, because you can grow natives in this potting mix. You can grow palms, flowering plants, camellias and azaleas. Love it, believe it or not. So there's so many things you can do. And the one last thing I'm going to say about this particular company that I really love is that I use a lot of potting mix in my garden. So I've got a lot of plastic bags left over, and their plastic bags are recyclable. Now, normally, the normal potting mix bags that you'll get are not. So they end up going to a landfill, and that is a significant problem as far as I'm concerned. So the fact that these guys are doing so many good things, we should be supporting them because they're doing the right thing. And two is we should be supporting them because their product works. That's what's going to make a big difference. Okay. Sorry, it sounds like I'm preaching, and I don't mean to, but I really believe in when we talk about these products, I really believe in them, and I'm sharing it with you because I want you to get the very best results. It's really important. Okay, let's get back to questions. We'll move on. Aruni is in Perth. Hi, Aruni. Loving this rain. Me too. Can you please tell me where I can buy a pandanus plant? I've got a small greenhouse and you can keep it in there. Right. Aruni, pandanus is very much the tropical plant. This needs to be protected, so your greenhouse will be the perfect environment. And over here in the West, you want to go to a specialist edible plant nursery. And the one that I always recommend people go to is Tas1 Trees. So Joe Tassoni out there does an amazing job collecting plants from all over the world. Now, whether he has got pandanus right at this moment, I'm not sure, but it's well worthwhile checking out because this is the fruit and edible plant time of the year to get in and check those nurseries out. They've got so many interesting plants. Okay, so we've gone from cool, wet Perth and we're heading all the way up to the Gold Coast in Queensland. Hello, Glenn. Is it safe to use the treated water from a biocycle septic system to water fruit trees? The company who checks the pH for the outcoming water. The system does use chlorine tablets to purify the water, take any bad bacteria out. And if I do use it, should I put the sprinklers from the system on a couple of meters away from the drip line for extra filtration through the soil? It's a really good question, Glenn. Now, I use a very similar sort of system myself, and I'm a big believer in these systems. I think it's a great way to reduce your water consumption, and at the same time, there is a fairly high level of nutrient in these waters. So plants that are productive are going to use those nutrients, and so fruit trees is actually a good way to do it. The question I've got, and the question that you're raising here, is does long-term use with high levels of nutrient mean that you are going to do something bad to the soil? And there is definitely a risk that you could get, big build-up of phosphorus in the soil, which can be quite toxic. I don't think, from my experience, that is a problem that you need to worry about. So I'm watering fruit trees using a bio system, and it seems to be working perfectly well. They're very, very happy trees. So I don't think there's anything to be concerned about. That's my advice to you. If you were concerned, you could flush them every once in a while with your existing irrigation system, just to make sure that you're getting the salts moving through the soil and no excess nutrient build up. But my experience is I think the fruit trees will do all the cleansing of the soil of any excess nutrients, and they will love the extra water. So that's where we're going. All right. Okay, let's go back here to WA, to Riverton. Hello, Carol. Trevor, love your show. How long does it take for sweet peas to flower? Firstly, thanks, Carol. That's really sweet and very much appreciated. When it comes to sweet peas, they're a pretty quick flowering, quick growing and quick flowering plant, but they do like it a little bit warmer. So here in WA, we are starting to get some cold snaps. You're probably going to see that it's going to be June, depending on when you planted them. So typically, Anzac Day is the day that you plant your sweet peas seeds, and they'll generally sort of flower about 10 to 14 weeks after that at the latest. So that will help. Staying in Perth, everybody I think in Perth's enjoying the rain at the moment. Albert's from East Cannington. This is a follow-up question about my effort to amend alkaline soil in the side passage of my house to be suitable to plant azaleas and camellias. I think I've given up trying to amend the soil to lower the pH. East Cannington pH isn't that far off. It shouldn't be that difficult. The last effort you made was to mix it with Charlie charcoal products that claimed it can reduce the pH level, but it was not so successful either. Charlie charcoal, I'm not sure of the brand, but I'm suspecting that means that it's a charcoal product, and charcoal is a buffer. It will buffer the pH. What I'm kind of worried about is if it's the area down the side of the house, maybe when the renderers were doing the plaster work, they've dropped a bit of the liquids that they often have there down that side, because that will really send the pH right off, and you'll find it very alkaline because they should be growing in your environment. If you want to sort of cheat it, what you can do is get some larger size pots, about a 40 centimetre pot, dig them into the ground and plant into the pot with an azalea camellia potting mix. You will not go wrong. The one thing I'm going to ask you to do, though, is to take a sample of your water to the local pool store and ask them what the pH of the water is. Because if the pH is alkaline, that might be where you're constantly getting this problem with alkaline soil. It just seems strange, because I know that East Cannington, it's a black sand generally, and in some areas a bit of a peaty kind of environment, which would be more acidic than alkaline. It's not like the coastal plain of Perth as such. Hopefully that helps, Albert. Interesting problem. The pot in the ground solution may well be the way to go, I would think. Ron is in Perth. Hello, Ron. Loving the rain finally. Me too. Having a bit of an issue with your rhubarb. It's growing in a pot, not really able to control the slaters, etc. from feeding. I do use Dipel from time to time. Okay, so what it sounds like is slaters are chewing little holes in your rhubarb leaves or stems, And when they get into plague proportions, that's not an unusual thing. I think last week we talked about slaters. Slaters are a crustacean, so they're a member of the prawn and crayfish family. And if you've got enough of them and maybe a little bit of garlic butter and a wok, and you put them all in there, you can make a lovely little meal, but I wouldn't suggest it. I'm only joking with that. Don't do that. What you should do with the slaters is probably get some orange halves. So squeeze some oranges, squeeze the juice, put the halves in the top of the pot, because it is in a pot, at night, just on dusk. And what you'll find is the slaters will rush to that before they'll go to the rhubarb, and they'll get inside and they'll be eating that sugary sort of acidic flesh of the orange. Collect it, pop them into a plastic bag, give them to the chooks, or tie a knot in the plastic bag and pop them in the bin, or move them to another part of the garden, move them away from your rhubarb. But that will definitely get them. And I'd much prefer you didn't use a chemical at all. So Dipel is actually a bacterial treatment. It's probably not going to do an awful lot, I would think. It's really designed to treat caterpillars. Hopefully that helps. Now, another great friend of ours who has joined us today, and I'm really pleased, is Tella from Leadville in New South Wales. Hi, Tella. Thanks so much for coming back to us. Now, how often can I use Charlie Carp on natives through winter, Trevor? Now, I wouldn't be using Charlie Carp on natives at all. And the reason is that my understanding is it's relatively high in phosphorus, and most of your natives will not like that at all. So it's not a fertilizer I would use. I would be using controlled release fertilizer once every 3-4 months, probably this time of the year. So I'd probably do it now and again, sort of maybe in August, I suppose. And I'd probably give about 50 grams per plant, which is quite a lot. If they're a mature plant, it's not, but it's quite a lot. But that's about a handful for me of Osmocote, and I would have that around the base of them, and they'll do really well. Vermita is in Melbourne. Hello, thanks for joining us, Vermita. How can I keep my vegetable garden free from weeds? As they're mixed. Oh, okay, I get it. So you've got your veggies are growing now, and you've got the weeds in amongst them. There's a couple of ways you can do it. You could get some newspaper and you could put it over the soil around the outside of your vegetables, and it'll smother them out. Put a little bit of mulch on top of that, and it'll improve the soil a little bit. The other thing is, and some people like it and some people don't like it, but weeding. Weeding is something we all really have to do this time of the year. It doesn't have to be back-breaking work, though. You could sort of stand with a straight back and use a cultivator or a Dutch hoe, for example. There's nothing like getting a hoe out into the garden this time of the year. I've always enjoyed that. That's one of my favourite things to do. Alexis is in Gosnells, Perth. What is a good hedge that flowers for a native garden? Maybe a native shrub. Well, Westringia is magnificent, Alexis, and in Gosnells, Westringia grow really, really well. There's a few different types, but this is a shrub that you can compact down. You can keep them trimmed up. They can be a formal hedge. They can be an informal hedge, and they tend to sort of stay fairly low, maybe a metre and a half, and sort of a similar width. So you plant them at 1 metre spacings along the line, the boundary you're looking to screen, and put them in. Really good. There's a suggestion for you. Katie is in South Australia. Look at these questions coming through, and it's great to have Katie joining us from SA. Crepe myrtles and newly planted trees. Last spring, you planted a number of advanced trees. The hornbeam, which is something I just can't grow here. Natchez crepe myrtles, which were largely unaffected by the heat. That's fantastic in both instances, because hornbeams just won't grow where I live over here in the west because of the heat. They just seem to be really affected. But this year, it appears like they were affected by summer heat. What's the best way to prepare and nurture them over the winter into the spring to minimise the chance of burn-off leaves in the early part of next summer? There's not a lot you can do during the winter. Mulching is really the most important thing to do. And it's, as I said to you, you can do it now. You can do a big, thick layer of mulch. And I'm talking like 150 mil deep layer of really chunky organic mulch in a big bowl around the outside of the trees, not up against the trunk, but on the outside. Good way to moderate temperatures and keep moisture consistent in the soil. The reason why we have problems in the west with this is because hornbeams and crepe myrtles, to a lesser extent, they don't like dry extremes. When it gets really dry and there's not enough moisture in the soil, the first thing you'll see is the leaves will burn on the outside edges back into the centre of the leaf. And that's really problematic for these sorts of plants. So, Katie, it's probably about mulch, it's probably about water, but don't worry about doing anything during the winter. All those plants are going to sleep. They're going to have a rest, and that's a great way for them to go. So don't do anything right now. Natalie, I'm not sure where you're from. You say green worms are always my problem. Any natural ideas? I pick them off too. I would think that your green worms, by the sounds of it, are green caterpillars, and it's not an unusual thing to see a fair few of those just at the moment. Natural Solutions, Success, Dipel, they use a bacterial treatment that upsets the stomach, the digestive system, and I'm thinking that might be the only real option you've got other than hand picking them off. Hopefully that helps, Natalie. Dot is in Adelaide. We've got a lot going on in Adelaide. This is great. Does soil go off? Even my potted lavender is almost dead. Does soil go off? It doesn't go off, but it does run out of goodness and nutrients. And particularly now, as you're going into winter, it's a brilliant time to repot things like lavender. They really need nutrients coming into the soil. So I'd say it's time to get some of that really good Osmocote Premium plus the superior potting mix and give them all a good pot up. It'll do them the world of good. Let's go to stay in South Australia. Amanda is in Richmond. My ornamental pear has just started dropping its leaves. It needs a significant prune. Can I prune once the leaves have gone, or do I need to wait for the end of winter? Prune them now, Amanda. It will not hurt at all. And think about the shape. Any crossing over branches, remove them. It depends on the variety actually, because there's some really lovely upright sort of conical kinds of pear trees. And what you really want to do is probably make sure you prune it to the shape you want. If it's more of one of the spreading trees, encourage it to spread out and not be too tall, so you can kind of enjoy the shade and get more of an effect with the foliage when you get into the autumn next year. Margaret is in the Upper York Peninsula in South Australia. Hi, Margaret. Thanks so much for joining us. I know you join us on a regular basis. I'd like to have a go at growing raspberries this year. Never grown them before. What do I do to prepare the soil? Yours is pretty sandy. Now, to give them the best start, best thing you can do is get lots of organics into the soil. So mine love sandy soil. I've got them growing in raised garden beds. I've got them in some sort of quite sandy, coarse growing medium, and they just love it. They do really, really well. So that's really all you've got to do. But a bit of organics this time of the year. You'll buy them. They should be going dormant if they're not dormant already, and get them in, and they'll take off in the spring, and probably late spring, early summer, you'll end up with some lovely fruit. All right. This weekend is the second last episode of our autumn series. It's been a big series, and I'm hoping you've enjoyed it. Now, we've got a great episode coming up for you. Here's a sneak peek.
G'day folks, I'm in for an absolute treat today. The borders have opened and Ruck's in WA, and I'm at the magnificent Perth Zoo. Visiting some of the relatives perhaps? Maybe.
When it comes to pruning, don't be scared. The main pruning happens after their full flush of flowers in spring. But if you're finding they're getting a little bit straggly at this time of the year, it's so easy to give them a light prune.
With winter fast on approach, it's actually still a great time to be planting in the garden, in particular bare root roses. And they do not look like much at the moment, but they are a future promise to your garden of beautiful flowers.
And speaking of roses, you saw Bonnie there showing the bare-rooted roses that you can get your hands on and save some money. Great way to go, really good way to go. And we talked with Rowan from Garden Express about that today. We've got a special offer coming up this weekend for you on the Garden Gurus. So make sure you check that out. All right, that is it for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. We're very sorry if we didn't get to your question today. We had so many questions coming in. We're always trying to answer them. We'll do our very best for you. But thank you so much for engaging with us. Robin's going to send a message out to our seed winners after today's show. Tyson, I reckon you're in with a pretty good chance today. I'll be back next Monday for another session of the Garden Gurus Live at 12 p.m. That's Australian Eastern Standard Time, or 10 a.m. over here in the West if you're in this part of the world. Don't forget to get your photo submissions into Facebook by this Wednesday. You can also send videos, and you've got to make sure you tell us your name, the state, suburb you're from, and your question. Remember, if you've got any questions or you want to do a bit of research on gardening, have a look at some good information or maybe get some links to people who are doing great things, then you can jump onto our website and catch up on our previous stories from the Garden Gurus. And the way to do it is to head to thegardengurus.tv. Or maybe you want to watch some videos and episodes. You can do that by going to our YouTube channel as well. And if you just want to listen back to today's live stream, capture the whole session because maybe you missed part of it, you can do that by going to Spotify or Apple Podcast or Audible. They've all got it. You can listen back and enjoy it then when you want to listen to it. And of course, please don't forget to tune in to Channel 9 this Saturday, 4:30 p.m. local time, to catch episode 14, our second last of the Garden Gurus Autumn Series for 2022. Happy gardening, everybody. I'm Trevor Cochrane. I look forward to seeing you next week for another great session right here on a Monday morning with the Garden Gurus Live.